My name's Renee. I'm from ATI Technologies, and what I would like to give you today is essentially what we've shown at GDC already. It's there. It was called optimizing for DirectX. It's not only optimizing for DirectX. There are some techniques in there that you can, of course, apply for OpenGL. It's essentially just describing our VPU and what you should be aware of when you're programming for graphics. Obviously, we are no mobile device that you carry around, so our target resolutions for games, etc., is 1280, 1024, or 1600 by 1200, 2x, 4x, 6x AA, wherever you think you're limited. When you program your vertex shaders, take care of the pre-vertex shader buffer. The pre-vertex shader buffer in our X700, X800 chips is 256-bit, so that's 32 bytes. So align your data to fit this size. 32 bytes, 64 bytes is fine. Sequential access would be great, but by all means avoid random access. Random access is absolutely deadly when you're working with a small buffer like this. Compress your data. See if you can recreate Z. If it helps you to fit them into the 32 bytes, then you may want to just calculate Z and the vertex shaders rather than sending it with your data. You're feeding 6 parallel vertex shader units in X700, X800 series of boards, so you have plenty of vertex power. You will hardly ever get vertex shader limited. Most people that think they are vertex shader limited are actually limited in the vertex shader buffer rather than in the vertex shader itself. These vertex shaders contain a 4D and a 1D ALU. Mask out your unused channels. If you don't need a channel, mask it out, and you may get 2 ops per clock per vertex pipe rather than only 1 op per vertex pipe. The post-vertex shader buffer contains 14 entries for triangles, 15 for lines, 16 for points. It is only available or accessible when you use index primitives. So not draw prim, but draw index prim. It's flushed between draw prim calls, whether it's draw prim or draw index prim. And we strongly suggest to use D3DX optimized mesh. It does a very good job of optimizing your triangle mesh. From the post vertex shader buffer, you're feeding triangle setup, which feeds the rasterizer. Triangle setup is actually never a performance concern for us, so you can't really do anything wrong there. It just floats through, so triangle setup shouldn't be of any concern for you when you're looking for performance. From the rasterizer, you're feeding the pixel shader units. They are always aligned in quads, so it's 4 pixel pipes in every quad. Obviously, for X800, X850 series, you have 16 pipes, which means 4 quads. For X700, you have 8 pipes, which is 2 quads. Every quad can work on 1 triangle at a time, whereas different quads can work on different triangles. If your triangle are an inconvenient size, you're slipping down to 25% efficiency because you're out of that triangle, you're really only rendering 1 pixel because that is the only visible one in the quad we got dispatched. So there is another situation where people think they might be triangle limited when in fact they are actually fill rate limited, meaning that the quads can't deal with very well with very small triangles. The texture cache, which the quads are using, is smaller than you think, unless you thought only a few K. Some of your demos would fit in, some of them would not. It is partitioned over all active textures, meaning that If you do really heavy multi-texturing, you don't get much of the texture into the cache, so it's very easy with multi-texturing to get limited in here. And again, as the pre-vertex shader cache, it's wrecked by random access. We know we can't always ask for sequential data, but try to avoid jumping back and forth like hell. Z is rejected faster than accepted. You know that from your local nightclub, rejection is faster than acceptance. Logically, Z would be at the end of the pipeline. That's not how our hardware works. We do an early Z, we do Z compression. We have many techniques to avoid rendering data that is not visible on the screen. So you should be aware that we are compressing Z data. You should certainly be aware that we have the possibility to kick out data that we don't need to render. So roughly draw front to back. Back to front is bad for us. Front to back is obviously better. For complex scenes, for really, really complex scenes, not like an overdraw of 2 or 3, but if you have a very high overdraw, consider Z pre-pass. And always take care to clear Z and stencil. If you really want to wreck our early Z benefits, then write to ODEF. Obviously, don't do that. If you use alpha test on visible pixels, you will actually decompress the Z values that we are trying to compress to make them faster. So if you're using alpha on visible pixels, you're losing huge benefits of the early Z mechanism, or of the hyper Z mechanism as we call it. And changing the Z compare mode can break our early Z optimizations as well. With 16 pipelines, we can reject up to 256 pixels per clock. So let us do it wherever possible. The pixel shaders are powerful, but don't do work in the pixel shaders that you can do elsewhere. If you're just adding up 2 constants or something like that, do it in the vertex shader. We said earlier on that the vertex shader, we are never limited in the vertex shader. So if you just do some simple math or anything like that, where you don't really care if it's done in the pixel shader or vertex shader, do it in the vertex shader. Pixels are more common than triangles. There are more pixels than triangles, normally at least. So try to keep the pixel shaders free for your real pixel work. Still, the pixel shader is a 4D unit plus texture address, of course, meaning that the ratio pixel shader power to texture power is 4:1. This will go up in the future. So texture power, we are actually at a stage right now where even if we would add more pixel power, we would get bandwidth limited pretty quickly. And really what we hear from developers is that they want to run more complicated shader programs to make each unique pixel look better rather than just throwing more pixels at the screen. Shorter shaders are generally faster. It doesn't matter what the instruction limit is for a shader. If you keep your shaders short, we can store multiple shaders in our caches, and we can execute them faster as well. And again, the same for the pixel shader as for the vertex shader. Mask out your unused channels. It's a 4D unit. If we only have 2D 2 channels to work with, we can do 2 operations at a time, right? We can do up to 4 scalar if you want to in 1 clock cycle per pipe. This is not only true for us, right? It's the same for NVIDIA hardware. It's a general DirectX advice. If you don't use all the channels, mask out what you don't need. Don't worry about scheduling your instructions in the pixel shader. The compiler does it, and it does a pretty good job at it. If you find a case where you can beat our compiler with hand optimized code, we would like to hear about it. But generally, the scheduler is pretty good. Frame buffer, fork, and blend operations are not part of the pixel shader. Keep that in mind. It's essentially a special function of the memory controller, and it's quite easy to get bandwidth limited here. So try to avoid frame buffer blends wherever you can. Oh, that's it actually. So I'm through and open for questions. Louder. But I'm finished. That was it, yeah? Any questions? I told you I'm quick.
Does it work? Okay. Yes, often you said that you should do this and should mask out other things and so, but what are exactly the reason for masking out unused channels? Because the channels are ready and I don't see any reason for this.
Okay, reasons are really flexibility. If you have two sets of data only using two channels in a 4D in a 4-channel pixel shader, or pixel shader unit, you can actually run 2 operations per clock, rather than only pushing one 3D set of data through the shader.
And so the parallelism of 2 operations in a 4-channel unit is automatically done by the driver.
Yeah, absolutely. Our compiler does the scheduling for that. So
Okay.
our compiler is actually looking out for sets of data that can be worked at the same time.
Okay.
And it's pre-sorting them before it sends them into the pixel shader. So when we say the pixel shader is a 4D unit, what we really say it's any 4 channels. If you have 4 one-channel scalar operations, we do all of them in 1 clock.
With the C buffer compression, you said that changing C compare modes would sometimes disable the C compression or disable the early out test. Which modes?
I can't tell you exactly which ones. I'm not that much into it, but it does not always break Z compression. It doesn't break early Z. It just breaks Z compression. So you're not breaking the whole part of the pipeline.
Okay, so you can't tell us which modes are slower.
I simply don't know which from what to what mode you're breaking it.
Another question. I wonder why the alpha stage was taken out of the pixel shader, while you can still modify the Z values.
Why was it taken out of the pixel shader?
Exactly.
I can't tell you what design decision was behind that.
I've got 2 more questions. First, what's about the performance of gradient instructions? And the second one is, what about the performance of dependent texture lookups? Can you give some hints?
Give some hints on how to optimize for them. No, I don't even have any specific hints for gradient or texture lookup. We've seen that. No, that wasn't texture lookup. You meant texture lookup, not normal table lookup or anything like
yes,
that.
exactly.
No, I have nothing specific for gradient or texture lookup.
You said that compilers are very good and I want to know how the vertex shader compiler, the high-level shader language, or GLSL, does the trigonometric functions. What resources he uses?
The HLSL compiler or driver compiler?
A driver compiler. Because in assembly you don't have trigonometric instructions, and so you must use some kind of Taylor coefficients, and I want to know how much resources are spent on it.
Okay, generally the suggestion is always use HLSL when you're programming for DirectX 9. The trigonometric functions are actually now performed in one clock cycle since X800 and newer. So X800, X700, X850 in Radeon 9800, 9700 series, we were actually taking 4 clock cycles for trigonometric.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I have just another question, but how efficiently could be the graphics GPU used for complex and massive calculations, which does not relate to graphics but to sound, like FIR filters and so on? Are there any optimizations for this?
Okay, the idea is not new. That actually came with the dawn of floating point precision in our graphics chips. That people said we could use it for so much more than just graphics. So far, you're lacking an API to reach the graphic chip. Secondly, you're obviously lacking documentation from our side, because we are very careful about exposing register information, etc., etc. I believe we are working with a few projects in order to do more than just graphics on the GPU, but one of them I think we're even doing in the UK. I believe Richard Huddy is working with the university on that, but there's nothing where we can say, okay, here's an API, or this is what we are suggesting you use to use us as a general processing unit, or rather than just a graphics processing unit.
Is there anything in this kind planned?
A general API? No. There are certainly some groups pushing for it, but there's no big market where we say, okay, now we have to define API specs. So far we are talking about research projects, where a handful of people tries to do some really funky stuff with our chips, but so far all these groups have not had a sit together to define any APIs or anything like that for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a way to get to ATI's demo group?
Is there? Sorry.
Is there a way to get to ATI's demo group?
Oh, I believe we are accepting applications at any time. So if you want to come into our demo group, you would become commercial, obviously. But they are based in Marlborough, near Boston. We actually don't call them demo group. We call them our 3D application research group. And I believe they're accepting CVs.
Thanks.
You want to give me your CV as well?
How expensive are render target changes, and what is the best way to recreate MIP maps when you are doing render to texture?
Okay, render target changes are mostly you're really getting bandwidth limited. So I wouldn't worry too much about your your bitmap changes when you're changing your render targets. So you're rendering to texture or...
Well, there's of course a lot of render target changes when you're doing image post-processing, like layer and stuff.
Yeah.
And another application is to render into a texture and then use the texture in a 3D scene. And especially when you're using DirectX, there seems to be no reliable way to generate the MIP maps for that texture. And without MIP maps, it's of course awfully slow.
Okay. I don't know if DirectX doesn't know a reliable way of generating the MIP maps of such a texture, then I don't know of a way either.
Hi. Do you know what the current best way to do particles on the ATI hardware is?
What do you
Vertex
mean?
buffer, or I don't know.
Yeah, you're doing it over the vertex shader. That would be the preferred way.
Come on, don't be so shy.
I'd like to know, you said several times that it's very expensive to use transparency. So if you have a scene where you want to use massive amounts of transparency, what is the best way to do that?
Okay, this presentation is actually focusing on performance. If you want to use transparency because it makes sense from an artist point of view, use it. Right? We're not telling you not to use it. We're just saying be careful if you do use it that you will lose performance, that you will get bandwidth limited, etc. pretty soon. So it's yes, you have to find the right trade-off between performance and visual quality, of course. That's some decision we can't make for you. Okay.
Okay, I think that's it.
Well, I'm sticking around, so whenever you think of something, ask me if you have more questions or those questions that I couldn't answer in here. Just fire them off to devrel@ati.com. You find the link and email address on our webpage at ati.com.
Okay, thank you very much. Give him a hand.
Thanks.